Kim and Laura. So if we can open the meeting, if everybody would stand and join in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thanks. Do we have any citizen statements or petitions? All right, and I don't believe we have any correspondence. Although there was one email that the board received today from, let's see. From Ann Mazar. I'll just read. It says, "Hi all, I received word that Mendon will be receiving an additional $74,793 of state funding for the Mendon Community Preservation Act. This makes the total of state funds to the Mendon CPA accounts $347,316. This is an 83% match to Mendon CPA tax levy in FY22. The additional funding is thanks to the work of the Mass Community Preservation Coalition, gaining $20 million in budget surplus funds for the Mass CPA Trust Fund. Mendon is able to receive the much higher percentage match at 83% because we're at the 3% levy level. Towns at the 1% and 2% levy level only received a 38.5% match or less and are not included in the surplus rounds of state funding. The state rewards the towns that invest in their towns at the 3% level. Happy 2023, and it's sent by Ann Mazar, the Mendon Land Energy Use Committee Chair and Mendon Community Preservation Community Chair. So that's was some good news. So if we go on to point 4, or item 4, we have 3 more people to interview for the open ZBA position. So is John D'Amelio?
Yep, here.
Hey, could you come up to the table and want to give the members the ability to interview. And actually, before we go any further, I just wanted to make a point. Obviously, one of the, or maybe not obviously, one of the 3 members to be interviewed tonight is actually my son, Tom Morali. And I reached out a couple of months ago to the Ethics Commission and received a written and a verbal finding that there was no financial interest, so I didn't have to recuse myself in any way for that. Because he is my son, I needed to make a written declaration that I could be impartial. Because of the optics, I'm not going to vote, but I did provide a written disclosure. I'm making that now verbally as well. So, John D'Amelio,
Yes, sir.
I know that I know you sent us an email, but maybe you can just explain to everybody why you want to be appointed to this full ZBA position, and then maybe some of the members will want to question you.
Well, many of you know already that I've already resided on the Water Commission for a term and the Planning Board for a 5-year term, I think it was. And at one point I was going to run for the position of Planning Board again, but you know, there was a gentleman who was already had that position. He was running again, and I chose not to run against him. He's a business associate of mine. And then I received the position of an alternate on the ZBA, and I figured the next step would be running for a, you know, full position. If that answers your questions.
Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask?
I do. So you mentioned that you had considered running for planning board recently. Do you see yourself being interested in running for planning board in the future?
Really, I just want to be involved in the town one way or another. I feel as though, you know, with my background, and I should know it off the top of my head, 25 years construction supervisor, 20 years as a realtor. Right now, I'm the assistant building inspector in the town of Bellingham. You know, and I've been in Mendon for 20 years, you know, consider it my home, and just want to, you know, help on whatever position is available. And right now it's the ZBA, so.
Thank you.
Mike, God, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks. John, just a quick question. What do you see the primary role of the ZBA to be on behalf of the town?
What are the duties of the ZBA?
Yeah, what's the primary focus for the zoning board in your eyes?
Personally, or? Like,
Yeah, well, however you want to answer the question is fine. Yeah.
well, basically, you know, if you wanted the legal purpose of zoning would be to promote public safety, health, and general welfare, implement comprehensive plans for the town, protect the environment, protect property rights, protect property values, regulate property use in accordance with the community standard and values, set standards for development, prevents or reduces nuisances, and conserves land for appropriate uses.
Just curious then, is you made the distinction of personal versus official. I think you sort of read sort of the statutory side. Personally, what do you see the role is?
Personally, I'd just like to be able to use my experience in infrastructure development and, you know, the knowledge that I've acquired over, you know, 50 plus years on the planet, to help benefit the town in whatever way I can.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for John?
Yeah, I think, oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go right ahead.
Well, I just actually probably an easy question. How long have you been an alternate on the ZBA?
Since, oh, it's been for at least a year.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm not sure of the exact
Okay,
date.
no, that just,
Yeah.
it at least gives me
Yeah.
a scale.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Two of my questions have already been answered, but you touched upon what you can, what expertise do you think you can bring to the ZBA? And I know you've touched
again.
upon the couple.
My knowledge of construction, infrastructure, development, the experience I've acquired in other towns, building and, you know, erecting structures, infrastructure, roads, you know, all the general building requirements.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I have an email from Ellen Agro just to answer the question. John was first appointed as an alternate to the ZBA on 9/1/2020, and Tom Raleigh was appointed on August 6, 2019. Does anybody have any other questions for John? All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
How about Peter DiGaetano, is he here?
Good evening, everyone.
Thanks for coming.
Sure.
I know we've seen your email, but if you'd like to just tell us a little bit of why you want to serve on the ZBA.
Sure. I've worked, let's see, in the past, about 21 years in heavy construction. Worked 13 years for a major heavy construction company in Boston. Past 6.5 years, I worked for the MBTA as a quality control inspector. I feel that zoning board of appeals is something that I could take on and still be within my wheelhouse, which is ensuring that regulations are maintained, met. And, you know, if there are variance requests, everything is properly done to ensure that those requests are, the board's legal obligations are met.
Thanks.
I've been a construction supervisor since 2009, certified building inspector since 2008. I've held a bunch of different licenses throughout, for heavy civil work, but I also work on stations, a lot of controlled construction at the MBTA. Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? Mike Goddard, you raise your hand, sir.
Yeah, hi, Peter. Thank you for throwing your hat in the ring. But same question, sort of from your perspective, what do you see the primary role of the ZBA is on behalf of the town?
Well, I think ultimately you have to have the town's best interests in mind at all times. And I think a lot of that is a lot of regulations are voted upon ahead of time. If there's any variance from that, there needs to be deep consideration onto, what impacts that that occur after that, not only for that individual project, but for future projects, I would believe. So, I think it's just something that it's an important body to have in town to ensure that construction or everyone's rights are not saved. What's the word? Rights are met, I guess, recognized. Excuse me.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for?
No, my questions were answered during.
I have a quick question. So have you served on any other town boards, or have you considered other town boards?
Yes, I have. I just, I haven't, I'm not really considering that at that time based on, I think this is something that I could take on, possibly in the future though, potentially, but I don't see it anytime soon, quite frankly. So.
I do have one quick question. So it said that you're interested in filling the alternate position.
Yes.
So you're looking to fill that position if the alternate position becomes available.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, that's a good question, Peter. Would you be interested in being one of the regular members?
Yeah, if I were to be an alternate and the time would come, absolutely.
Okay, well, we're going to appoint one of you to this position, and then if we need to backfill to an alternate, we would do that. But
Okay.
this application is for really for the full position.
Sure. I'm willing to do so.
Does anybody else have any questions for Peter? All right, thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
And then the last candidate is Tom Morale.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? Good to just go right in. My name's Tom Morale, a longtime Mendon resident, lived here my whole life of 32 and a half years. My email introduction was very brief. I figured I could delve into my reasons for wanting to be in the ZBA tonight. So I've been, as was mentioned in Ellen's email, I've been on the Zoning Board of Appeals as an alternate since 2019. In addition to that, I've served on a few different boards, the Historic Commission, the Economic Development Committee, the Historic District Study Committee, where we studied a historic district which passed a town meeting, which I was on with Mr. Goddard. Through all these committees. I mean, one thing that comes up constantly is really setting a direction for where Mendon's going to go in terms of development. And the way I see the ZBA, in addition to the statutory responsibilities that were laid out, I see the zoning boards of appeals primarily as a quasi judicial board, which takes the zoning laws that that are on the books for Mendon and really discusses how they are to be applied in terms of variances, looks at issues pertaining to things such as housing equity, among other things, and really takes all these into account when, in addition to how stringent the requirements are on property owners in determining a direction for where Mendon's going to go. That's something that greatly interests me. It's interested me since I've worked on the Historic District Study Committee. So that's why I'm hoping that you will consider me to move up from being an alternate to a full member of the board. As it's, you know, I've been in these discussions now since 2019, and I think I deserve a vote at the table and would like one.
All right, does
Tom, how
anybody
many-
have any questions?
Yeah, Tom, how many boards are you currently on right now?
I am currently on 2, including the ZBA. I'm on the Economic Development Committee, and I'm an alternate for the Zoning Board of Appeals.
And you're our town moderator as well.
Correct.
Mike Goddard?
Yeah, I guess I'd be remiss if I didn't ask a question, but Tom, you answered my stock question in your intro, so I think I got a sense of that, but you talked about, in what you said, you talked about trying to drive a balance, and I'm just kind of curious, what are the factors in your mind, based on your, I guess, your experience to date, that you'd bring to the table or consider when you're thinking about granting a variance?
Well, I think number one is, and you know, this is right in the question, which unique factors about the property, topography, shape of the property, might make this variance from our zoning laws, which, you know, are passed by 2/3 majority in our legislative body of town meeting. Which unique factors, extenuating factors make it so that this variance for this property owner is something that should be considered? You know, there's things such as the shape of a property. Hey, I don't want to have to build a driveway and build this driveway over marshland all the way on the other side of the property. It makes more sense to build it on this thinner stretch of land, which might not have the frontage the zoning laws require, but you know, it would make more sense. Looking at situations like that where the zoning laws, when applied stringently, would cause someone to spend, you know, a property owner would spend a great deal more money to achieve the same goal at the end of the day. That's something I would look at. I mentioned earlier housing equity. You know, Massachusetts has an affordable housing problem. We get money from the state as a CPA community to build affordable housing, which we are supposed to, according to the state, have 10% of our stock, housing stock, be affordable housing. That's something we haven't quite reached yet and are pretty far from. So that's something I take into account is, would building more houses on the property, would it be affordable housing or not? I mean, it's something that's been brought up at ZBA meetings before, that when in ZBAs around the state, that one role that they can play is that of enforcing housing equity. Again, also, is it something that would maintain the character of, when granting these variances, would it be in line with the character of the community that we're trying to achieve? These are all factors I would look at when choosing the grant variances, or special permits in the case where the ZBA would look at special permits, which there are some that we do look at.
Thank you.
Tom, in a situation such as we were looking at a subdivision that was, let's call it 12 lots,
Mhm.
and it needed a variance, or the alternative is that comprehensive permit can go get one by the state.
Mhm.
And
You mean like a 40B?
it could be 40B or 55, whatever it may be. And the apartment buildings even, so which would fall under the 40B, that now we would be looking at, is the 12 lot subdivision better for us as compared to a 400 unit apartment complex?
I mean, I would have to hear from what the residents of the neighborhood have to say. I would have to see what sort of proposal they're talking about. And also how many of those units are going to be affordable. That's really the factors I have to take into account either way. I mean, this is something that sounds like it's a hyper-specific scenario, and that's why we have these discussions, is to really weigh all the factors before we decide. But I would say I lean more towards something that fits in within the character of the community, as you know, we've looked at in the past, and I know it's something the planning board looks at. I know it's something we're looking at design guidelines, stuff like that. Again, these are all factors that would have to be weighed, but I would say that, you know, some housing equity is something that's very important to me. Affordable housing is something that's very important to me, and I would take that and weigh it in my decisions.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have questions? All right, sounds like nobody else has any questions, so. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me, guys.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
So I know that we had, last meeting, we had interviewed one candidate for FinCom. And we have one open spot. And I'm just checking an email that I had received from the town clerk about a previous candidate who had was a Canadian citizen. And the summary of it was, we need to shy away from that because you need to be a citizen to be able to vote. Last time we did interview one person, Mr. Adam Griffin. And I don't believe we've had any other people come forward at this point. I did reach out to Shannon Elliott, who you might remember filled in so we could have a quorum for the FinCom at the last special town meeting, but I hadn't heard back from her. Does anybody have a motion to appoint Adam Griffin to the open FinCom position?
I would make a motion, but I did speak to Adam. He is in the process of getting his citizenship, which was stalled due to the COVID situation. He's been here since '92. He is, other than his piece of paper that, he's got a social security number, he works here, he lives here. I wouldn't make a motion to appoint him to a voting member. In the past, we have appointed non-citizens as non-voting members.
Right.
To the expertise we could bring. So I would make a motion to do that if the board was amenable to it. But other than that, I don't, as being a non-citizen, I wouldn't appoint him to a voting member until he got his citizenship and was registered to vote. But he did mention that he would serve in the capacity of a non-voting member if we were so inclined to appoint him. So I would just have to, and maybe we just expire it every year. And
Or do you suggest maybe that we just invite him to participate like any citizen could and then just leave this open? Because we do have 6 voting members right now, so it's not like we're in a situation where we need a quorum.
No, I
He's
don't
so
think-
qualified though, you know?
It wouldn't, again, I don't think that I don't think that this would fill the seat as a non-voting member. We would kind of be making a non-voting position. I know that you can, but to, maybe actually have the titles is a little bit, gives you a little bit more skin in the game, I guess. But again, I'm impartial on it. I just wanted to let you know that I spoke with him and thought he would be a good addition.
So based on the.
I thought he
resolution-
was, I thought he was a strong candidate. And
Yeah.
I think I'd go with what Lonnie's suggesting, just to kind of bring him into the fold, because I think it's a skill set we can use.
So
Completely.
did I hear that you made a motion to appoint Adam Griffin as a non-voting member to the FinCom?
Yep, term to expire June 30, 2023.
Second.
Did I hear a second?
Yes.
Later, yeah.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, that's great. Now, if we move on to and let's be clear, this is the open voting regular member of the Zoning Board of Appeals. There are 6 that we interviewed. Vicky Grisanti, Matthew Clark, Leah Botta Whiting, John D'Amelio, Peter DiGaetano, and Tom Morale were the 6. With John D'Amelio and Tom Morale are both alternates on the ZBA right now with terms to expire on June 30th, 2023. And the open position that we're filling actually is set to expire on June 30th, 2023. So is there a motion for that?
I move to appoint Matt Clark to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term to expire June 30, 2023.
Is there a second? All right, Mike God, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just a comment too. Before we went to that step, I wanted to say I was really impressed with the candidates that came forward. And as a board, what I'd like to put out there in the future is I actually look at expanding the ZBA to possibly 5 members at the ATM, a topic for discussion later, Mr. Chair.
All right,
So
sorry, I didn't see your hand up at first. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think great candidates came forward. So I guess I'm looking for some direction because we're sort of running into this. So Lonnie made a motion, and should I just if there wasn't a second there, should I be making a motion for another candidate? Or should we discuss the candidates before we start making motions to see if we can come to some agreement? I don't know how we want to do this.
Well, I think the first step is if nobody wants to second that motion, then I'd certainly entertain discussion about all of the candidates if you wish. So if there's no second, then that nomination failed at this point. So does anybody have any comment, other comments or?
Yeah, I also feel that we had 6 very strong candidates, so it's an embarrassment of riches in a way that I think all of them showed a lot of interest and knowledge and are qualified. So I think it's going to be a difficult decision.
But I'll make a motion on a candidate, on my top candidate, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
I'll move to appoint Tom Morale to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term to expire June 30th, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion been made and seconded. Is there, all those in favor?
Can we point a discussion just before?
Sure, sure, absolutely.
I just want to kind of, I think Matt Clark is a very strong candidate, and I think that, I don't want my not seconding that motion to be a negative, right? I'm just looking at Tom, and I do give kind of even my, when I worked, internal candidates tended to get a little leg up. For me personally, as a hiring manager, and I think Tom and John both have put in time. I think the thing for me with Tom, it's his actually participation in the Economic Development Committee that catches my eye, and only because when you look at what I've seen in terms of the chapters in the master plan, the whole economic development chapter is being driven by, the zoning and possible changes to the zoning. So I think that would be having a member of that committee in the ZBA might be a very valuable addition. That's I just wanted to explain my reasoning for it.
So
Oh, go ahead, Lonnie.
I'm just having a hard time with that reasoning, Mike. As we've looked in the past here, we just changed bylaws due to the fact that people across boards with boards that touch each other are essentially a problem. So I'm wondering why this one is not essentially a problem.
I think the economic development is more a recommending body, not a decision-making body, if I understand it correctly. So anything that committee would put forward actually probably come through the board, the select board, or the planning board to actually drive action. So there's sort of it's not, to me, I maybe if it is a decision-making body, Lonnie, I will retract my motion, but I didn't think it was. I think it's recommending policy and direction, not decision-making. So that would be the distinction I would make.
Tom, when was the last time the Economic Development Committee met?
Earlier this year,
When?
maybe April, May. We're process of scheduling another meeting right now.
Thank you.
All right, there's no more discussion. Let's take a vote on this nomination. It's been made and seconded. We probably should do it as a roll call because some of us are remote. So all those in favor?
Did I?
Brugos, aye.
Chanel abstain.
Tenio, no.
All right, so it's 2-1 with two abstaining. I'm abstaining as well. So the whole position is Tom Morale. Now, I think it's appropriate for us to backfill that, and that would be the one that expires June 2023. Now we have his alternate position that's open, and unless there's an objection, I'd like to take an opportunity to nominate one of the other 5 candidates to that now open alternate position.
I move to appoint Matt Clark as the alternate to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a term to expire June 30, 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? And I will say I've known Matt Clark, I hate to say it, but 30 years, and he's great. I would say I'm kind of disappointed that a woman isn't getting the spot, but we can keep them and hopefully they'll. But anyways, any other discussion? All those in favor of Matt Clark as the alternate?
Aye, Tenio.
Did I?
Brugos, aye.
Chanel abstain.
All right. So that's Matt Clark as the alternate. Congratulations. On to item 6. Appointment of Police Sergeant John Coffey.
Good evening.
Evening, Chief.
Chief.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chief.
Evening.
A little background, tonight I'm asking you to appoint Jack Coffey as a sergeant. He'll be backfilling a 3rd sergeant position for quite some time. Actually, since I've been chief, I haven't really been able to backfill a lot of the structural command staff that I wanted to. I worked on kind of reorganizing the department for the past 5 or 6 years, getting us to where we need to be. Command staff structure, just structure in general. Police and fire have old traditions of just doing things because that's the way we did them before. And when I came in, I wanted to start doing things a little bit differently. When I started, I basically, Jack started the same way. They threw us keys and said, get in the cruiser and go drive around. Mike did the same thing. It's my FTO was going to Ernie Horn's dinner table, driving around with him for 2 hours, and then I never drove with anybody ever again. That was my career. And then when I became a sergeant, basically the same thing. Congratulations, you're a sergeant. Now figure out how to do the job. So what we've done is I've really focused on training. That's why the budget went up in training. We've really invested in all of our officers from the bottom up, redone training, make sure we train people before they become supervisors. Jack has gone to several sergeant trainings already with sergeants actually that go to the training because again, it's hard habits to break. Other departments still do the same thing. They make a sergeant and then they just send them to classes. So Jack's been through the whole entire process. We had an assessment center, independent assessment center come in and do a process for several positions. Corporals, sergeants, and lieutenant. Right now, sergeant is an appointed position, so that's what I'm asking you to appoint him to that position. Jack came up where you needed to be in that process. He joined the department in 2004. In 2011, Mike, remember, Mike Goddard, that was when we had our financial crisis, and I think you were one of the board members when we did layoffs. Jack was one of the ones laid off back then. In 2019, I convinced Jack to come back, do right by him and bring him back to Mendon. And he came back and he's been here since 2019. Does a great job. I think he's going to be a great addition to the midnight shift where we've been really lacking supervision for the past few years. We won't have to run all the sergeants thin. We'll have enough shift now. So I'd ask that you appoint him there. At the same time, I'd like to recognize I am making 2 corporals, ranked 2 corporals. It'll be Steve Cinco, it'll be Corporal Cinco, and Nick Erskine, he'll be a corporal too. Those will be entry-level supervisory positions that will assist the sergeants. And at this time, I'm going to make Sergeant Kilkowski staff sergeant. He's going to go from days to nights, be an extension of me on the nights and handle operations. And I'm going to continue days on operations and more admin like I do. And we're going to keep the part-time lieutenant for now because I only need minimal help admin wise because we're going through accreditation and post and everything that is associated with that. I mean, I tend to like to take a lot on it myself, but I realize that there's too much that I just can't handle, but not enough to warrant another position for that. So at that time, that's the rank structure. And I'd ask you to appoint John Coffey, Jack, as our midnight sergeant. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Chief, I'm just wondering, so are you looking for a motion to appoint all 4 of these and?
Nope, just Jack.
Jack.
The other appointments are my appointments. I just wanted to let you guys know where the whole process went. Because you will see the letters coming forward when I make them in these positions that, where the reorganization came from. We're kind of getting back to kind of the structure we had back when I was lieutenant. A good, strong, solid structure that will serve the department well. Help with supervision, especially now at post and the way things are in law enforcement. You need round-the-clock supervision. And in a small town like this, it's important. We've really focused. I've really focused on liability for the town.
So Sergeant, just so I understand, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So the Sergeant Kuklasky, his rank isn't changing, just the designation. So that's why you don't need a motion for that.
Yeah, he'll be a staff sergeant, with himself as another rank, but we negotiated that back in 2020. And that gave me the assignment powers for those. So corporal is a rank too, but that goes through me, where the lieutenants and sergeants are still appointed by the select board.
Okay. So we need a motion to appoint Jack Coffey as sergeant.
I move to appoint John Coffey to position of police sergeant at a rate of 47.07 per hour.
Second.
All right, any discussion?
Glad to have
All
him.
all those in favor? Yeah, congratulations.
Tenio, aye.
Chanel, aye.
Brugos, aye.
Goddard, aye.
And Raleigh, aye. Congratulations, Jack. Well deserved.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We get a picture, we usually get a picture of you guys.
Congratulations with you guys too.
Congrats in the back.
Right?
Want to get it in the screen, or what do you want to do, so we get these guys in, or? Nick just instructed me how to take pictures, he thought he was getting away with not being in.
Can you get everybody?
First. What's that? No, we don't usually do that. We just do that. Okay. Just- Nick. Everybody. What do you want, Nick? Three's good. All right, and then you want one phone? Come forward. So you can do your Facebook.
37 with the phone.
Portrait mode if you can. Portrait, if it works. No, I can do portrait. Wait, actually, I don't know if I can. No, I can't do portrait. Okay. I put it back there. I got much for you.
Thank
All right, we're good. Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Congratulations, guys.
Congrats.
Congratulations. Right, item 7, appointment of new assistant treasurer collector. Kim, you want to walk us through that?
Sure. We recently had a vacancy in the finance department for the assistant treasurer collector. We advertised and received both internal and external candidates. The person being recommended tonight is actually a person that previously held the position, an internal candidate who had the position before, had shifted down into the finance clerk position as a part-time job as they worked a different full-time job, and now has decided to come back and work full-time in the job again now that it's vacant again. So I'm very pleased to recommend Tracy Accardi back into the position of assistant treasurer collector.
Does anybody have any questions for Kim?
So I have a question. You probably just said this, but I didn't catch. When did she work in the position?
So she worked here from 2018 until now. She's been with the town in some form of employment. She was originally hired as the finance clerk, was then promoted to assistant treasurer collector and was in the role for a while, and then left to pursue a different full-time job, but shifted down into the finance clerk position and stayed on working part-time at night. And now the position is open again, and so she wants to return back into the position.
Thank you.
All right,
move-
no other discussion. I'll be looking for a motion.
I move to appoint Tracy Accardi to the position of assistant treasurer collector at the rate of 26.79 per hour, full-time 37.5 hours per week.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Tenio, aye.
Chanel, aye.
Brugos, aye.
Butter die.
And Morale, aye. All right. Thanks very much. Item 8, we have a financial team revenue presentation. Do you want me to share this, or do you want to?
I think Eric's gonna take us through it and share his screen. I sent him the link.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay, yeah, I can, thanks to Lonnie setting this up. I see everybody's initials in on this spreadsheet, which is, pretty fun. I've been doing formula.
Boy, you
change-
are an accountant, man, and
I love this stuff.
Spreadsheets are fun.
Oh, it is. It's great. So I guess I'll start. Kim, do you want to do a little preface, or do you want me to go right into it?
I'll do a little preface. So this as part of the larger budget picture, and we're going to talk about the budget more after the revenues. Every year we compile we do an analysis on the revenues for the town for the year. We've talked about it a little bit, and Eric can go into more detail about the different types of revenues, but primarily, and we've talked about this a bunch, we're primarily based off of property taxes with very little other sources for revenue. We do have some local receipts that come in. I hear a lot of conversations about fees and questions about building permits, and we can get into that because I know a lot of people are curious about how much money that what we're really talking about. But I think you'll also see that the types of areas of growth are pretty limited for what we're possible to do within the town at this point. Hopefully that will change, but I think it'll give people a better understanding of why we're so confined within our budget. And so we've been working on the revenues the last 2 weeks. And so just for anyone that's on the boards, all of these files are available to you on the shared drive to access. And if they were to change or be modified at any time, that's where they would be.
Okay.
There you
All right.
go.
Well, all right. Thanks, Kim. So for those that don't know me, my name's Eric Kincheroff, and we serve as your town accountant. I think we've been there for like 6, 7, 8 years. It's been a while. And on the call also is Sean Griffith, who works with me. He does most of the grinding work on the accountant. And then we have Jody Kersey, the treasurer collector / finance director, and Jean Berthold, the longtime excellent assessor that you have. So if you can see the spreadsheet that I have up on the screen, as a kickoff to the budget process, we did this last year, we started with the revenue estimates and what kind of revenues are we looking at for FY 2024. So just to give you an overview, Mendon's a little bit unique in most of its budget comes from property taxes, like 87% of the budget. Because you guys have a regionalized school district, a lot of the local aids goes right to the schools. So when we're looking at the budget, the property taxes are a really important part of Mendon's budget. So the other two components of the budget are what we call local receipts. Local receipts include, as you can see on the screen, like motor vehicle excise tax, which is like about half of the local receipts. And there's other things like meals tax, penalties and interest on taxes, trash collection, ambulance fees, licenses and permits. Even though this category is only 3% or less than 3%, actually, no, it's like 10% of the revenue. I'm sorry, 10% of the revenue. There's a lot of detail that even backs up these general numbers. For instance, I'll look at like you have fees for 59,000. So if I go to the actuals for fees, we'll see all the different fees that kind of add up. These are the actuals for FY22. Here's all the different fees, the components that make up that one figure, and you'll see that for other things like departmental recreation fund and assessors. And one thing that I'm really happy about this year, we have new software and a new chart of accounts. So this is not really conducive the way it's been set up in the past for our reporting purposes and standardized chart of accounts. So in FY 2023, this current year, we're working with a new chart of accounts, and the budget will also reflect the new chart of accounts as well. So the department heads will have the accounts may look a little bit different when they're doing their budgets, but all the departments are used to their accounts because they are using them right now. I mean, they're putting in their receipts, they're monitoring their budgets with new chart of accounts. So I don't know how many times I could say chart of accounts, but that'll be the last one. The other small component of the town's overall budget is the local receipts. This is the state aid, and it's less than 3% of the total revenue budget for the general fund. But basically, there's receipts here. There's the reason this $13,000 is subtracted is this money goes directly to the library. It can be spent without appropriation, so the library can spend that money without appropriation. And then there's charges that the state charges the town for, like mosquito control and motor vehicle registry marking and so forth. And then I just added this $30,000. This comes from this Community Preservation Committee. It helps offset one of the bond issues for the police police department. So because because the property taxes are such a big component, like 87% of the revenues, I'll go over that a little bit. And, I'm going to just give Jean Berthold a shout out here because she gave us a memo of what we can expect for next year, FY 2024, and she led us really nicely through the tax rate setting process she does every year. So if there's any questions about the specific of how these taxes are raised and new growth and so forth, I think Jean is on the call as well, if you have any questions relative to that.
Yeah, Eric, I know
Yep.
that I have a question, but Mike Goddard, you have your hand up. Why don't you go first?
Just a quick question, the cherry sheet offset, the library that doesn't require, the 13K that doesn't require appropriation. Just kind of curious, when we look at the budget, Kim, you can answer this, but where does that show up? If we're not appropriating it,
It wouldn't show up anywhere on the budget at all. It's a special revenue fund, so it's on the accounting records and the reports that we sent to the state. But as far as town meeting, it's not a budget, so it's
Right.
not appropriate. So the town meeting doesn't see it unless you have the reports that were sent up to the Department of Revenue.
How do we see how those funds, are those funds that the library trustees can spend in a fiscal year?
As long as there's money in the account, yes, because the statute that governs those says they can spend it without appropriation. So that money comes in, goes into a separate account, and then the library can use that money for library expenses and so forth.
So that money's off budget?
Yes.
So, okay, okay, thank you. So it's a special account, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, we
Okay.
call it special revenue account, but it is a special account. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're
So,
welcome.
And the question I had, and I don't, you were talking about the cherry sheet being about 3%. And I don't know if you need to answer this, or maybe I need to ask our finance director, treasurer, collector. What about fees? I know at one point when I was talking with the Division of Local Services, one of the things they were going to look at, and I'm sure we'll hear about this, is how our fees compare to, other towns in the area. But my question is, what percentage of revenue do those fees from the different departments come from? Do either of you have a number or a percentage?
Yep, it's 10%. It's 10%. It's like 10.38% of this local receipt. So this makes up 10% of the revenues to support the budget, of which 1.1 million is from motor vehicle excise tax.
So about half of it?
If you go
Yeah,
back
half
to
of it.
the second page with more detail, you can actually see where Eric was before. This is the listing of all the different fees in detail. A lot of people talk about, building permit fees and should we be looking at our fees and seeing if they're comparable and should we raise them? We actually
Exactly.
talked a little bit about this today because that's one of the things I don't think a lot of people understand, that I think only about, even stop right there in the licenses and permits, this entire amount that we bring in is $270,000. So even if you're talking about, 2% increase, right, in fees, it will create a shift, but it's not going to be a dramatic shift. Doesn't mean it shouldn't be looked at, but it just needs to, in terms of perspective about an impact to creating revenue for a budget, it's important to sort of know the sizing of it.
Okay, and I guess just because I don't want to lose this train of thought, we're talking about revenue. Well, I had a question about insurance premium for retirees and how that fits, but maybe that's not appropriate. This is a revenue discussion, right?
Right.
So,
Yes.
okay. Mike, you have another question? Your hand's still up. Do you have another question or?
Yeah, no, I've gotten good at that. I take my hand down now between questions. Is there, and I think I saw something about like solid waste disposal in there. Is there a way, if these are zero sum revenues, meaning that it's an input to an expense and it zeroes out annually, do you separate those, or can we separate those, sort of categorize them differently?
Okay, so the answer to your question is the way it currently is set up now, the solid waste is part of the general fund. So the money that's billed out for the solid waste comes into the general fund, and then you have a general fund budget, like, whatever the appropriation is.
Right. I guess what I'm trying to do is how can we visualize those funds that are really, it's a zero sum game, right? We know it's a revenue, but there's an offset expense kind of like water, right? We do that every year with water, the water cost.
Yep.
We charge water, but we know we're paying, I guess, Hopedale for water. So is there a way we can separate that so you can get a better sense of what is actual variable revenue versus those things that have an automatic offset? Does that make sense? And I don't know if the new chart of accounts might do that for us.
No,
Just
no,
saying.
basically, as a matter of fact, I'm glad you mentioned that because it does, because we can run the revenue and expense report by department. So there's a report like this year that we can finally run. It's a revenue and expense report, and I think it's Department 431. You just run one report, and you should be able to see, the revenues and the expenses for that one fund. So you can definitely see it. If you really wanted to do something, you could make the waste collection an enterprise fund, and then it would be a legally separate accounting fund. Like the way it is now, it all goes into general fund. So, for instance, if the revenues weren't enough to cover the collection, it would just get eaten up or whatever. So
I'm just thinking about for the average, for someone like myself who's looking at these numbers, there's a net revenue that's actually could be allocated to projects and or whatever we want, operational expenses. But there's some dollars here in the revenues. When I look at the total number, Eric, it's not really that high because and everyone in the finance team knows there's a certain amount that's actually already accounted for, but the average person looking at a number like this may not realize that because we're just looking at one side of the ledger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense because when you set the fees, that they're supposed to be designed to cover the cost. So,
right.
Exactly. So it's not just like arbitrary, all right, we're going to just raise the fees and it's all going to go towards, like, some of these fees are designed to cover the actual cost of the program.
And Kim and Jody, I'm just thinking about the way to present it in a way that eliminate potential misunderstanding, if that makes sense.
I think we do need to, I think we do need to take a closer look at this, particularly because health has increased to an amount that's about $580,000, $560 to $580 per year. And the fees that we bring in don't necessarily cover the costs. And I talked when I was covering for the Board of Health for a little bit, I did speak to them about maybe for the next contract going out, looking at why we sort of serve as the middleman between an independent contractor and the trash haulers. And I think that's because some of that is administrative costs that we're funding, right? And I think that there could be savings on our side and maybe for residents if we took a look at that. There are a lot of, I know there are hassles with using private contractors potentially sometimes, but a lot of towns do that. And if there's a way that we can get those numbers closer together, we should be looking at it.
Thank you.
And the only thing I'll say is, like, this is, we meet on a weekly basis. Kim coordinates the finance team meeting and we talk about these. So as things change, like if all of a sudden the governor says, hey, we're going to, double the local aid budget, we just change it as we go. But the bottom line is right now, to kick off the budget season, there's like 677,000 more in revenue than there was in FY23. So what that means in, like, layman's terms, it's like if the budgets came in 677,000 higher than they were last year, you'd have a balanced budget. And so that's it. So the whole thing, and I noticed.
I'm sorry, Eric. Just real quick. You said something that caught my ear. And it's tracking of changes. I would hope that on something like this, you have the original forecast captured, but if the state changes their numbers, you have a incremental increase column. So you're not losing the original forecast versus the updated forecast. So we can start to do some analysis around progress, against plan and things like that. Is that fair? Are we doing that?
No, but we would just change them on the fly, but we can do that. As a matter of fact, all we have to do is create another column, and this will be what was presented tonight. the one for 24, and then we could, yeah, we'll have the tonight, and as things change, we could have, insert a column here as things go, and what was the reason why we changed it. So we
I
can
mean, I
keep-
would think the new software package probably has that built into it, I would hope. So it might already be done for you in the new package.
Yeah, well, we'll see, but I understand what you're saying. So
Yeah,
basically.
we need
what
to
you-
track changes for sure.
Yeah, so basically we're gonna memorialize this forecast tonight, and then we can see where we, by the time town meeting comes, we'll see how things change between tonight and when town meeting votes, and we should be able to track those changes, so that's a good idea. We'll see if the software does do that, and that would be great if it did. If it doesn't, we can track them as we go, and that way, as you can see, I can see all these people in on the spreadsheet, so everybody has access, so we can do that.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I just want to jump in here for a second, since we're at the top still before we scroll to the bottom. The FY23, these are the estimates. The actuals that we used for FY23. So like the question is, how different is this than what we were using last year when we starting right from a starting point? And this estimate between new growth and the 2.5 increase is only about $9,000 more than last year from a starting standpoint, right? There's not much change in what we thought we were using and starting with. So remember last year, I kept saying the number we were using was about 315, but that was the half. This is the same sort of, we're still in that same ballpark, 615, 630, same area.
So with that said, that's the basic overview. If there's any questions, we'll take them. I don't know if Jody or Jean want to chime in.
I got a quick question here. I got a question on the new growth. So the FY24 estimate is 220K. I guess the reduction from the FY23. Why do we believe there's a significant decrease in new growth?
Because the principal assessor has a very conservative approach towards the new growth. By the way, this is the principal assessor, Jean Berthold speaking. So, hi, how you doing? I'm a firm believer in budget for what you need in May and budget for what you want in November. So free cash is a big thing to me, and I believe to the DOR's philosophy also. Last year, we had a bit more in new growth because we had a first-time solar field come on. So that was a one-shot deal. Then we also had a 16 unit condo subdivision come online last year. I'm tracking what we have so far this year, and anything that's been approved, there isn't much approved that's new. We have a handful of houses up at Sylvan Springs still under construction. We have 2 commercial buildings, but we only have 6 months left because we assess as of June 30th. So what they can get done within that 6 months is questionable. So like I said, I always like to go for the conservative side, hoping to make that or exceed it. And if we do exceed it, then that's kind of a prize at the end. But as you can see, it fluctuates all over the place. This is a guessing game. We don't know who's going to pull permits, what they're going to pull permits for. Like I said, right now, I checked with the planning department and there's nothing really approved that would be of any, size right now. Muddy Brook might come online, but that's maybe 8 houses. So I'm not looking at anything really big this year so far. Tomorrow, someone might pull a great permit, I'm hoping.
Mike Goddard, you have a question?
Yeah, a comment, I think, because Jean made me, I think Jean's approach has served us well, the conservative approach. So I'm all for it. I think it's, a pretty solid approach. I'm just curious because I see the FY22 actuals and one thing, and this is a budget prep meeting. So my question really more has to do with how do I know how we're progressing against FY23 estimates right now? Are we behind or ahead of plan based on fees, licenses, permits, things like that? And if we want to defer that question, we can, because that's really not specific to preparing a budget, but it would be something I think we should be talking about in terms of how we're progressing against plan intra-year. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, yes, and it does make sense, and we could provide, now this is something the new software does. We could put in the revenue budgets, and we can do a report. You'll see what the revenue estimates. There's a report that we can give you that'll show what the budget revenue is and what it actually is to date. So
Okay.
that's definitely something that we can do, and it's not any extra work. It's just a report that's out there.
Okay. And I realize some of that stuff's cyclical, so it may be misleading when you first looked at it. So I know it's important context when real estate taxes are being collected, et cetera. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's always a good barometer. So I
Yeah,
can
the
circle
big,
back with somebody after the fact.
the big one that would raise your eyebrows is like the motor vehicle excise, because it
Right.
says 1.1, yeah, because it all comes out in March, it gets collected later in the fiscal year. But
Thank you.
no, we can get those reports, absolutely. So that concludes what we kind of wanted to go over tonight. So I don't know if there's any other questions or comments.
Hang on, we got one here.
Yeah, I had just a follow-up comment to that last point. At my place of employment, we often pull monthly reports and save them in a particular location so everyone can see the progress throughout the year. That would be something I'd be interested in looking at if it's not, too difficult.
I mean, if the financial software is worth anything, it
Yeah.
should be able to automatically generate your tracking and see how you are to baseline and.
Exactly.
No, it absolutely does. And I don't know if you have a sign on where you can get the reports, but we set up all the reports, so you just click a button, you'll get the report right away. So I'm not sure.
Lonnie set us all up on the SharePoint drive, so the finance committee and the select board will have access to all of those documents and has. I think this would be our third year, I believe, but I see we got some hands up. I think Mike Goddard, you had your hand up.
Go
first, I
to
think.
Nick first. I've asked a lot of
All right,
questions.
Nick, you have a question? Nick's the answer?
Yeah, hey guys. This is really directed, I guess, towards Kim. Do we have a sense of the overall schedule for the budget season this year? Have we thought about putting some key dates on the calendars for department heads and for FinCom and for select board?
Well, let me just chime in there that we've talked about this, and I know that we're still doing the revenue piece, but I know we plan to invite the FinCom with the select board again like last year, and I know we're working on those dates, but Kim, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but go ahead.
So I sent the memo out a couple of weeks ago with the proposed calendar with dates on it. It should be in your email, and it's also in the shared drive in the finance committee folder. It's the FY24 budget memo. Of course, the dates that I've listed on there that are proposed are just what my idea is, like that we would be meeting every other Wednesday, and basically what our schedule would be if we stuck to that. In terms of the overall budget, I guess we're rolling into my next item anyway, which is this one. Where we're at right now is the departments had until December 31st in order to provide me with their data. This year is a little bit different because we are uploading the raw data from the old KVS into the new chart of accounts. And so there's an additional step. And part of that means that I need to meet with the departments to basically show them where their old data was and what the new data looks like. And then we'll start meeting in 2 weeks. I'll start there, which will be, this is where we're at now that everything's in, and then we'll start bringing the department heads in. I'm not anticipating, the biggest challenge I'm anticipating this entire year is basically understanding the new system. Just, sort of getting that down and getting into a routine in which, we know what to anticipate. I haven't seen, considering our numbers are very similar to last year, I think we have a pretty good idea what to expect overall.
Go ahead, Jean.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everybody, I think the report is a great idea, but just remember that a lot of our income doesn't come in the first 6 months. So if you can remember when you're looking at these reports, the end of December, you're not going to see half of what we expect to get in. Again, the biggest excise commitment we have, we actually got it out January 31st last year. That will come in the second half, and also any increases in taxes will only come in that second half. So just so you bear that in mind when you're looking at those reports.
But there's a spend to plan over time that's important to know, right? And I think that's where people are looking to make sure that we're capturing that spend to plan over time.
It's the burn rate.
So, I mean, I think to echo those points, and we've talked about it before, there's two aspects to budget. One is creating the budget, which is what we're really talking about today. But what we need to think about is how do we manage the budget, right? And I think that's, burn rate, that's, revenue collection. So if there are reports out there, Eric, and, I know we have access to a SharePoint. If we want to kind of put a package together that could get loaded to that SharePoint, that'd be fine. Or if you want to give us logins, we can run our own reports, that'd be cool too. But I do think active management of the budget is really a piece we should try to get in front of.
Yeah, I think I was just thinking about that. I just texted Sean. I mean, we can provide the reports, so you guys can decide, or Kim, what protocol you want to distribute them. I think it'd be easier that if we just ran them and then you guys just could see them. Like, do you want them just dumped on the SharePoint, or whatever?
Right.
So I can, whatever way you want us to give you the reports is fine.
I think a revenue expense report getting saved into the SharePoint would work fine for now, because we know how to do, like, just to my point from the meeting before, we are all learning the software, and we just moved on to the one with the fancy charts and the graphs. Like, we are just getting there, but we know how to run the raw data reports that we're used to seeing. And so, like, those are the typical, so we can save those, one per month, and you can look at them, then we'll figure out how to get to all the cool bells and whistles that it actually does. I mean, we got to get the data in.
Yeah, and the beauty of these reports that are set up is we mentioned the off-budget accounts, but these reports will include all the off-budget revenues and expenses as well. So not just the budgeted one. So it's good. It's good. It'll be good.
All right, does anybody else have any questions, or is there more to your revenue presentation? So are we ready to move on to just give us a quick budget update, Kim?
Yeah, that's basically the update, which is the status of where we are in the process. Now that we have an idea on revenues, and we can see that it's pretty similar to last year, which will give us a basic idea of guidance that we could give to the departments for their requests. Like I said, they just had to have their data in 4 days ago. And so now this end of this week, beginning of next week, I'll be working with Sean in order to manually move the new numbers into the new system. And then we'll start running to see where we're at deficit wise or expense wise. And then I'll be able to actually print out from the new system what the new budget looks like when I meet with the departments, which should be the next 2 weeks or so. So, and I'm from this point forward, I'm going to try to keep an item on the agenda basically every meeting that we have. So if there is anything significant about the budget outside of just, a department coming in, like the documents, make sure if you don't have access to the link or you don't know where they are, reach out to me. I'll make sure that you can access the files. We do have I'm putting every document, even some extra things, into that finance committee folder, like debt schedules, just things you might want to poke around in if you're interested in looking at more. We have previous year budgets we can put in there. Today we already put in the FY21 revenue analysis, very similar to what Eric just did today. There's other things you can look at. We'll also have, a working copy of whatever the budget is at that point, or at least reports from what we're running as we figure out how to do them.
Go ahead, Mike.
So Kim, when you put it out in SharePoint, are these copies, or are they, can you bullet, well, this is me saying, if I go in there, I don't want to mess it up. So do you have is this a dummy copy, lockdown, or,
Yeah, read-only document.
All right,
Okay.
so the documents that I'm putting in the finance committee folder should all be read only, okay? The select board has access to actual documents that you could mess up, which are in the finance department, okay? Just pay attention to which one you're in if you want to make notes or, you know, that sort of thing, right? Or save it as a separate copy and then send it back, something like that. Because some of the issues I'm having, even moving the data forward, as you know, as the years forward, is there certainly around personnel. You know, when we run a report from the system, it provides all types of personal information that I don't want to have. It's not a question of the financials. It's a question of making sure that whatever documents we're making available don't contain something else that we don't want out. So
Yep.
that's really what the issue is. So I'm making sure that everything that goes in the finance committee one I know is a public document, share it, whatever, you send it on any way you need to. Just be
Lon, do you have a
careful in the
question?
finance department.
It's more of a statement. So Kim and I actually, we need to set aside a few minutes to just clean up a few of the folders that are there, which are syncing between the server now and SharePoint. It's our final push to get rid of the in-house server now that we have KVS where it is and whatnot. So we'll be able to, we'll take that into account. Maybe we'll make even in each section, maybe a read-only area or just a read-only area that is just so everybody knows to go there, right? And we're not gonna.
Yeah, that's
spreadsheets.
Lonnie, that's my thought. I don't see why there's anything in there that shouldn't be read only. I mean, I would rather that we not be able to go in there and change numbers in a document. I think that's got disaster written all over it.
Even at the select board level, like that's more for.
Yes.
Him and Eric and them guys to be able to mess with.
Exactly.
I'm gonna
Exactly.
accidentally hit one and throw off the entire budget.
Right. I'm in agreement with you.
Right, but typically what's happening is I'm keeping my control copy where the select board, right, that's the issue is we're working within the finance department, which is under the select board, which you have access to, which is where I'm keeping my control copies too, right? So like maybe the issue is just making sure you're accessing just finance committee rather than the ones that are in that sort of thing, because there are hundreds of files in under the select board.
Well, I don't know, maybe this is a question for Lonnie. Is there a way to basically change account rights so that we can't possibly change any documents and we're only able to read? Because I can't understand any circumstance where I would want to be able to go in and change any numbers, and I want to look at it, but I wouldn't want to be able to change it.
Yeah, so exactly. So at certain levels, certain groups get certain read-only access and other groups get full access. We can even set it that you can't even download the files, right? So we can get as specific as we want or as open as we want. But Kim and I have been discussing this over the past few weeks of where are these going to lie? And it got into that. It just got so busy here. We're like, okay, just stick it here for now. And we'll just get everything swept up as over these next couple of weeks before the budgeting starts, so that everybody has the correct place to be in. Right now, it's still safe the way that it is because we don't have access to it.
Good. All right, anything else?
So I have a general question. Last year, I believe we said that we wanted to try and start the budgeting season earlier. It doesn't seem like we were able to accomplish that. Are we concerned about getting through everything on time with the new system and everything we need to push through? Thing is that we did not start earlier, or am I misremembering?
We did start about a month earlier this year because of the new system. We had to do a full-on creation to a brand new chart of accounts over the last 2 months. The timeline should, if we stick to the timeline that I traditionally have used in all of the past years, we should be well within the time frame that we need in order to accomplish this budget. I'm not worried about any of that. The departments have already submitted their data. If we're agreed on a schedule of calendar dates in which departments will come, the biggest potential delay in anything of our budget this year is the lateness of when we're going to get the school's final numbers, which this year is going to be a little bit later than it usually is.
So if the departments have already submitted their numbers, then they should be prepared to send out documentation that describes their numbers now, well in advance of any of the meetings of them doing the presentations, right?
Well, they are advised to, yes, have all of their documentation and to upload it to the file and to have that ready for when they do their presentations. Now, that's always been the case. Whether they choose to do so or not is a different issue. This system in particular will eventually have the capacity to upload those documents right into the system so that when we're looking at something, it's all right there historically, whatever why the change was, but they aren't uploading data into the system themselves this year. We are still doing it. So they'll be bringing documents or they'll be putting them in that folder.
I know I was a broken record on this last year, but I really would like to see documentation sent out at least 48 hours before the meeting. Like, you know, ideally it's a week, but you know, life gets in the way, whatever. But you know, hey, it's an hour before the meeting. Here you go. Here's all the stuff you're supposed to have read 5 seconds before you walk into the room. For new people, I know this is my second go around. I'm not as new, but you know, for new people, it's nice to be able to process that stuff and be able to ask questions also prior to the presentation as well, if we need. So I don't know how we set that standard or force that. You know, at my place of business, we have, you know, canceled big, massive things because documentation wasn't prepared in time, right? So we shouldn't be afraid to do that, but we need to hold ourselves accountable for making sure people are prepared to review what they need to review ahead of time. So.
Well, I don't disagree with that. I think the big difference between all our places of work and in this circumstance is that we're all volunteers for this, so we have much more limited time. So I think we're all in agreement that we just need to make sure that everybody has all that documentation available, and that's why Lonnie and Kim have been working with this SharePoint with the new, with the new system. So the fingers crossed that you'll have access to that data well more than 48 hours before. So Mike Goddard, do you have a question?
Yeah, well, more of a follow-on. I think that's a reasonable request that I'm hearing, and I'm not sure if we want to update the memo, Kim, that talks about target dates for delivery of documentation. If it, maybe I may have missed it, it may be there, but I think that's reasonable. And Mike, to your point, you know, we're volunteers, but these are full-time jobs for some of the people that are putting their asks together. So I think, I think it's reasonable to at least set the expectation that, you know, prior, because I know we have the meetings, we have the budget meetings set up with different departments, Kim, right? On your calendar. I'm wondering if we can actually add something saying, submit documentation per the ask, you know, with 48 hours prior or whatever that's reasonable, you know?
And my point, my point of saying that, Mike, wasn't that we should be canceling meetings. It's just that the idea that someone who is supposed to provide documentation hasn't yet to just say, oh, we'll just cancel it. Well, that's not going to happen because the volunteers only have a limited amount of time. The answer is you're supposed to provide documentation. You will provide the documentation. You know.
Right.
Okay, so
And
it sounds
just-
like that's
just-
part of the calendar then, right? That's
Just
Exactly.
to be clear, that is and has always been specified in the budget process letter that we send out. They know they're supposed to provide written support, quotes, estimates, justifications. They know they're supposed to provide them prior their budget meeting with me and then before the board. They know all of this.
See, I see the big difference before we had this scenario where there was something online where they could deposit these so people could look at them. Before they just were bringing it to you. Now the expectation is that the FinCom will be able to log in 48 hours or 72 hours before a meeting with, to look at the documentation. And clearly, if they've already put the numbers in, they should have done the homework to have the documentation to support those numbers. So they really should be there at the same time. So there should be no
Right.
reason
And I think
that anyone
for
who's provided
90% of the departments where they do all of that. We're talking about a couple of, one or two outliers that need to be better about their organizational skills around their budgets.
Okay. Nick, I think, Nick, did you have a question? Or did you put your hand down or?
I had it up and then I put it down, but I just wanted to echo the comments that Mike just made around making sure the stuff is done in time and the ability for us to look at it ahead of time and to be able to ask the right questions for the town people.
So I said, there's way too many mics here.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll agree with that as well.
And it's board to board.
Yeah, well, yeah. All right, anything else? All right, then our next meeting is scheduled for January 18th, 2 weeks from tonight. Does anybody have a preference between 6 versus 6:30? I know the last couple have been 6:30, but do we want to keep it at 6:30? Is this better? Or would you rather start at 6?
Personally, I find 6:30 just a little bit better, just because the end of the day lets me get home for a minute and
Yeah,
just have a bag of chips.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree. Now, Kim, do you know, is the next one, are we having the FinCom join us at that one?
You muted.
You're muted.
Yeah, I would assume going forward that we are doing something budget related. Most meetings, I would say, there's not really going to be any, it's not really decision making for a couple more weeks for sure, at least a month from now. But we will be talking about financial things. Like I would anticipate next meeting that I might have I would hope to have like a revenue / expenditure update, or I'll at least know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars in requests we have, that sort of thing. So it might, just informational. So certainly I think we should continue to invite them.
Yeah, so they don't need to post.
Right. Well, I don't know that they need to post, but I
Right.
mean.
Because they're not making the
Yeah.
decision, so
Right,
they're not deliberating.
right.
Mike Goddard?
Yeah, so I mean, looking at the budget memo that went out, I mean, it does have January 18th department budget presentations as a line item, starting on the 18th. So I would assume, are we on track to have a department? And if so, which department do we think we're going to be reviewing?
Typically starts with me and I cover like the 10 that I have. So because
Okay.
they're the general ones that we go through the ones I have first, right? I would anticipate for that particular meeting, I'll be doing the same thing I'll be doing with the departments, which is this is what it looked like before and this is what it looked like now. And then the questions will be like, well, I remember that we had, this was in this line, where is that now, right? Where are these percentages look crazy because this moved here and that moved there. I think we're going to need, that's going to take a little bit of getting used to.
So when we look at the memo, there's a series of meetings that say department budget presentations. When will we get the particulars on which departments we're going to look at each meeting? Do we have that laid out, or will that be part of the agenda when, prior to the meeting?
So typically, once I get a confirmation that those are the exact meeting dates that we are going to use, I send them out to the departments and tell them to request a date. And then I assign them a time and I send them a calendar invite. And then in the calendar invite for those meetings on those nights, I will list the departments that will be at that meeting in that night. And so, or like last year, I'll type them right in the title of the meeting, so you'll know which departments are coming. So if it's police and fire, right, you'll see it right on your calendar.
Okay, so
So they'll be on the agenda at least 48 hours before, because when the agenda is posted, who is
but
going to come will be
Right, so-
there, if not sooner.
and I'm just thinking about the lead time topic. So right now we've got a kind of a blank slate framework for meetings, which is good, right? As we
Mhm.
expected. I just want to make sure that, I mean, I personally would want, lead time to understand what last year was compared to this year prior to stepping into the meeting. Once again, 48 hours, that's minimal in my mind. I would assume that we're going to start to lay out which departments are coming to the table
Mhm.
on these preset meetings that were in the memo. So, in my mind, I block those. I assume we're meeting on those dates unless I hear otherwise. So I think
Yes,
we should
that's
start
what-
dropping in departments and figure out who's coming when. And even do you look at it and say, let's do the big hitters first? Because not all departments are
So-
created equal, you know what I mean?
Typically, this last year is the first year that we've been doing the meetings together. So normally I'm confirming with the finance committee chair about what their schedule is going to be. But since we're doing them all together now, I'm basically confirming with you what the schedule is going to be so that we can move forward. We've approached it in different ways in the past. There was a time, and I think you were here then, Mike. So there was a time when the only budgets that we actually saw that came forward were ones with requests, right? So anything that was basically a level service budget didn't come before a board. And then we switched it to every board. Then we've also switched it at times to departments if there's a request, or elected boards or committees, right? And so there are ways to go about it. I think if we're organized enough, which we should be this year, and everybody understands the new budget, and I don't anticipate a lot of requests, I think we have time to see each budget. Considering there are new members on the boards, on both boards, I think it's beneficial as we're basically creating a brand new budget. It doesn't hurt to go through it a bunch of times. And so,
especially when we're walking through a new chart of accounts and it's the first time. we're
yeah,
looking at
I
it this
mean,
way.
like, it might seem like it's the same, for some departments, it's the same budget they've presented for the last 15 years, but it might look different. And so I think that might be worth it for this year. It doesn't have to stay that way going forward. I mean, you can set a parameter and say departments that only have a variance of over 6% or something. I mean, but those are all different options.
I think it is, I'm sorry, let me raise my hand first.
No.
Oh, go ahead, Nick. Go ahead. Good grief.
It's all about the order, Mike, you know?
If you say so.
I think it's useful for all departments to come in and present their budgets, both for obviously the FinCom and the Select Board, but also for the town members to be able to hear from the department heads as to what they're spending and why. With the ability for us to be in our houses and watching this, and the people to have access, I think it's even more important for transparency. For each department head to come in and explain why they're spending the taxpayers' money. I think it's very useful.
Yeah, I agree with you. We've been working towards this for a long time to get to this level. And we're finally there. And while we're talking about it, the Department of Revenue Division of Local Services has completed their review. Kim and I have both talked to them once. I have one meeting and they'll be actually making a presentation to the board and the townspeople soon, with all kinds of recommendations. What we're doing right, what we need to do better, how we need to change, all part of this transparency, but to make the better use of all of our tax dollars and make sure everybody knows where it's going and how it's being spent. So, all right. Well, if there's nothing else, again, our next meeting is on Wednesday, January 18th. I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
And everybody, all those in favor?
There you are.
All right,
Burgos, aye.
all right, everybody.
Thank you.
It's unanimous.